Well, Kirsty, these are days when the pace of diplomacy has picked up, trying to get ahead of the growing Russian deployments on Ukraine's borders. Key is America's top diplomat Tony Blinken, who today travelled from Kiev to Berlin to meet French, German and British officials. They're trying to hammer out a common line to take to Geneva tomorrow, where Blinken will fly for talks with the Russians. There's other flights of note too been going on. President Zelensky of Ukraine today heading to Warsaw to garner the backing of Poland in these difficult times. And meanwhile, heading out of Britain over the North Sea and Baltic throughout the last few days, flights of RAF C-17s carrying anti-tank missiles to Ukraine. That airlift of weapons reminds us both of the potential price of failure of diplomacy and of the differences among European partners that mean that the British are not taking the more direct route over Germany. It's become clear that Germany was not prepared to expedite the paperwork for the UK to fly across their country. And even as UK weapons arrive in Ukraine, Germany says it will not be sending weapons too. And so the diplomatic rumour mill has it that Germany will not support an American initiative to shut Russia out of the SWIFT international banking transaction system if Vladimir Putin does send his army into Ukraine. Division and poor signalling are hampering the Western response. Yesterday, President Biden suggested a minor Russian incursion into Ukraine would be acceptable. Today, his Secretary of State had to clarify.
We have been very clear throughout. If any Russian military forces move across the Ukrainian border and commit new acts of aggression against Ukraine, that will be met with a swift, severe, united response from the United States.
Breaking news, NATO says it is sending additional ships and fighter jets to Eastern Europe amid Russia troop buildup near Ukraine, and now U.S. troops may be deployed.
This comes as the U.S. State Department is ordering family members of government employees at the U.S. Embassy in Kiev to leave Ukraine amid the growing concerns right now of a potential Russian invasion. Here's ABC's M. Nguyen with the latest.
This morning, the U.S. Embassy in Ukraine on high alert. The State Department now ordering diplomats' families to leave the region while authorizing non-essential staffers to depart. The latest sign that American officials believe Russia could soon invade Ukraine. Secretary of State Antony Blinken reaffirming U.S. support for the Ukrainian government.
If a single additional Russian force goes into Ukraine in an aggressive way, as I said, that would trigger a swift, a severe, and a united response from us and from Europe.
ABC News confirming the Biden administration is now considering sending more troops to the region. It would be on top of severe financial and trade sanctions against Russia, including the possible restriction of Russia's access to U.S. technology, in particular semiconductors that enable computer and smartphone technology, making it more difficult for everyday Russians to get consumer electronics. But officials stress no decisions have been made yet. In California this weekend, the U.S. military shipping out additional supplies to Ukraine following the administration's approval of $200 million in defensive security assistance. This comes as Russia has massed at least 100,000 troops near its border with Ukraine, prompting a bipartisan call for immediate action.
We begin this hour in Ukraine, where the first shipment of additional American military aid has arrived, according to the U.S. Embassy there. This is part of a package worth $200 million promised to Kiev last week by U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken. The initial delivery includes defensive weapons and ammunition as the country prepares for possible Russian aggression. Moscow has deployed some 100,000 troops along its border with Ukraine, but insists it has no plans to launch an attack.
The Russian military flexing its muscles in the Voronezh region bordering Ukraine. Moscow denies it's planning an invasion. But with this slick video released by its defense ministry, it at least wants to send the message that it's ready to fight. There is real concern in the region about Russia's motives. Russian troops are now positioned in Belarus, all along Russia's border to Ukraine, and are massed in eastern Ukraine, where fighting has been ongoing for years. Further to the north, the Baltic states of Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania are promising to support Ukraine with shipments of weaponry and military support, arguing that diplomacy alone can't prevent an armed conflict.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us. President Biden is ramping up the pressure on Vladimir Putin, warning the Russian president of, quote, enormous consequences if he invades Ukraine, and taking the rhetoric a step further, issuing a personal threat to Putin. Ukrainian leaders are trying to calm citizens, saying there is no sign that a Russian invasion is imminent, but the war games on the country's border are telling a different story.